Welcome to episode 34 of Disc and Dice. My name is Paul. I'm joined here by JT and Timmy.
Hello, hello.
Good evening and or morning, wherever you are.
For us, it's definitely an evening. Evening feels weird because we've been doing like these daytime pods because of coronavirus and isolation, because people are working from home. We've just been able to like squeeze in a podcast recording at like 1 p.m. when some of us probably should be working.
Let's move on quickly from that, shall we?
Just curiously, when we're talking about evening and nighttime, because right now it's like 8 o'clock, when does evening become nighttime? Because I've been told they're not the same thing. I'm not going to Google it. I'm not cracking out Google just yet. That's maybe for later.
I reckon 5 p.m. 5 p.m. Late arvo.
Well, nighttime's just got to be when it's dark, right?
Yeah. I say 5 p.m. for evening. Also,
I'd say 6. I'm in the 6 camp, Paul.
I don't know. Like, there is some weird nebulous zone between like 5 and 6 where it's like late arvo or evening, depending on. I feel like it changes all the time. It's like if you're doing something before and it continues into that time, it's late arvo. But if you're starting something, then it's evening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
guess
it
makes
so.
sense. But also, like, get off the damn fence, man. Make it call.
Yeah, I know. We might have to load up a one of those polls, Facebook polls or something. Get everyone else involved.
Just quickly, like, taking this whole thing back a step. Paul, can you please say the word evening?
Evening.
And now JT?
Evening.
Okay. Every other time you said it until just then, JT, you said evening, like you've got an extra syllable on all the rest of us. You pronounced the second E.
I mean, you're meant to, though, right?
Yeah, I know, but like when you said it in the intro, you said good evening. I thought you were being like a little bit silly, and then you said, "Hey, actually, when it becomes evening," and I was like, "Wait a minute."
Are you meant to pronounce it though? Is evening a 3-syllable word or is it a 2-syllable word?
Because it's like, is it the word
Eve.
even or is it the word Eve, like Christmas Eve?
It all depends on what period drama you're acting in at the time as to how you pronounce it. I was actually worried because I was worried for a second. I was like, what have I said now? Like, have I said like Eve and ing? Like, you know, like when people mispronounce stuff like bone apple tea and stuff instead of bon appetit.
And so now it's not even like when does it become evening? It's like what time period are you in if you were still saying evening? And then what would you say evening? Where's the cutoff? Are we talking 1800s? Are we talking 1900s?
It's all right. I'm sure Cora has the answer to those kinds of questions.
And this would also not be the first time that JT has mispronounced something in a funny way on the podcast.
That's true. It's one of his greatest assets. It's why we keep having him back.
Listeners need to go back now and go on the Easter egg hunt. You get a prize if you can find all the.
Yeah, I was just about to say that there are 17 mispronounced words in the last 33 episodes of Disc and Dice, and if you can find them all, then JT will buy you a new PC.
We always say in our little chat that's going concurrent to what you, the listener, are hearing. That like we're going to name the episode that mispronunciation, and we mean it every time. We just forget it every single time as well.
This might be the first episode where it's actually totally appropriate to do that now. So,
also, Paul, I know you keep like a spreadsheet of all the games we talk about, so that we can go, oh hey, have we already talked at length about Need for Speed Rivals or whatever it is, or can we spend a bit more time on that this week? I would love to discover that you had a spreadsheet for stuff like this as well, just like every episode that JT's mispronounced a word in and what that word was.
I wish I had that. That would be amazing. No, all I have is the games discussed spreadsheet since the beginning of the Disc and Dice era. And speaking of games discussed, that is what we do here. And Timmy, you're going to kick us off, I think, with a game that you've been playing that we will then discuss.
Absolutely. First of all, just a beautiful segue there, Paul. I feel like I was going to put it in the chat. I've just told our listeners that we have, but I felt like it bared pointing out in audio format as well. Yeah, I've been playing Anthem. I got it for $4. I think I mentioned this ages ago because, Anthem has got such a bad rap. Its launch went horribly. People were very, very distressed about what it actually was after the many, many months or years waiting for it to come out. And so I got it on the cheap, and it has just been sitting there on my shelf waiting for me to be between games. And thanks to a global pandemic, the time has come.
Sorry, Tim. Did you have something else in there? I was literally just about to jump in there and ask for the uninitiated, what's Anthem in a nutshell? What kind of game is it?
So it is a Destiny clone. Like, it's so Destiny, you guys. Like, I said it when like we were talking about trailers, and I was just like, why does anybody need this? It's exactly Destiny, and it is. It does a lot of really cool things, and like, I'm disparaging it now. I'm going to go on to like, give it a bit of praise, but it's so Destiny at a surface level, like to a crazy amount. Like, you are a freelancer is the name of the thing here, instead of a guardian, but essentially you are like, everybody lives in like these forts, which are like, half sci-fi tech and half like Persian looking medieval bazaar. So that's already Destiny straight away. You are kind of like a guardian for the people and a jack of all trades. So you're like jetting off to do your thing, but you're kind of also like, you look after the regular people that are all holed up in this. You have like a powered melee attack. You have a powered boosty jump. It's kind of like an alien planet. It'll all come out as I keep talking about it, so I don't just want to sit here and list the ways it's like Destiny, because I'm going to keep saying as I explain further, it's like Destiny. But JT, in a nutshell, what kind of game is it? It's a game like Destiny.
Now, just quickly, I haven't sort of followed what's happened recently. Is this that it's just like Destiny and it has had a big overhaul recently, or is that still to come?
As far as I'm aware, there's been no big overhaul. I think I heard mentioned today that there has been only one significant update since launch.
Right.
And yeah, there's not like been any big DLC or new story or anything.
Having said that, does it almost feel like to you, coming in a bit later after the release, that, I think it was produced and published by EA and BioWare, who are two, pretty significantly big players in terms of things. But does it sort of feel like a game they've turned their back on in a way? That they've sort of, that it's not getting that ongoing support like a lot of their other IPs are?
I'm too early into it to tell. I've played maybe like 3 hours, maybe 4. And so I'm very much doing early stuff, and I would be reticent to try and even explain what the core story of the game is. I can tell you what the setup is and kind of where I think it's going, but I don't really have a feel for how the narrative is going to unfold. And I feel like for a game like this, I don't think I could judge whether it's got the ongoing support from its developers just yet.
What about the player base?
So just quickly on what you were saying, JT, I think they have either said, or it's sort of been kind of rumored, that they are planning a massive overhaul. I just wasn't sure whether it had happened yet. So I got the sense that there hadn't been support because they're kind of changing the whole game. And yeah, I didn't know whether maybe that had happened, and that's why Timmy had jumped in. But I think that's
what I mean.
That must be where it's at now. They're kind of they're in the process, of developing what Anthem's going to be, which is such a weird situation.
But really is. Sometimes you jump into these types of games, like for instance, I recently, as in like the last year, I jumped back into Borderlands 2 just because I like, the gunplay in it. And that game, it's sort of a similar sort of vibe. It doesn't have the drop in, sort of drop out community aspect per se. But what I noticed is that there's just no one playing it anymore. And that's what I was sort of curious, Timmy, is like jumping into a game like Destiny, you can tell there's lots of people playing it. You don't have, there's there's no question that that's a game that still gets a lot of love. Whereas Anthem, you know, you might be able to tell just simply by how many people there are running around you, if it's something people are still playing.
So it's a little bit hard to tell because if I put it in Destiny terms, when you are in the tower, you don't see the other players. So
it's like your own instance.
They partially. So they call it, where I'm at the moment is called Fort Tarsus, and I think there's going to be a number of forts. And generally, when I'm there, I walk around and there's like, you know, the vendors and the different characters and stuff, and where I get my quests from, and I craft gear or whatever. I can do all of that, and there's no one else walking around with a little name above their head. I have just unlocked a little bit called the launch bay, and if I go in there, I can see other players walking around. When I was in there before, there was maybe 7 other players in there, but it's a small room, and I was sent there straight from coming in from the broader game, so I don't know if they like limit it to a number of people in there. One thing that does happen is when you go from your base out into the wider world, there's a lot of loading. Loading is a bit of an issue. I've found it can sometimes take forever, and I don't really understand why in the current climate of gaming, why this one has so much more loading than, say, Destiny. But before you get to the loading screen, you sit there on a different loading screen that says matchmaking, and it never tells me how many people it's putting in there. Generally, you are auto put together with a squad of 4 people. And, you know, I haven't ever had to wait like forever, ever. But, you know, there's been like kind of like 5 minutes total matchmaking and then loading. So it takes a little bit. Long story short, I can't really tell how many people are in there. It's really hard to tell.
That's actually something I sort of remember reading about when it was first launched, was the loading times being a bit excessive. But that's actually one, you know, it sounds like we might be throwing back and forth between Destiny and Anthem here. But one thing I really liked about Destiny 2, at least, because that's the only one I've played, with the loading times are significant, but it's kind of sneaky and smart in the way they do it, because they've got your ship flying through space in between all the different transitions, and it's just kind of cool to just look at your ship flying around. So it's not really like, you don't really feel like you're losing time in the loading screen. You're like, cool, there's my ship, and, you know, the cool background. And I thought that was handled pretty well. But
yeah, I was going to say exactly that. I feel like it's a long time, but it's because I'm sitting there literally watching a bar along the top of the screen fill in, which is, you know, it's like watching grass grow.
yeah.
Whereas on Destiny, it could be comparable, except I'm watching my ship, and so I can sit there and be like, I'm on my way, I'm moving. This has the illusion of progression, even though it is literally just loading.
Right.
The other thing with Destiny 2, just quickly, is that I remember with your loading, it gives you the interface to use while you're loading as well, which is very helpful. So if you want to be like, all right, well, it's going to be loading for 5 minutes, I'm going to go check all the challenges I haven't done yet, or I'm going to go and, you know, look at what's on the store, or you can still play the game while it's loading. Essentially, you can do your housekeeping, so to speak.
Yeah. You can't do any of that here, not only because, like, it doesn't give you the option. Also, I don't think the menus are particularly inspired in this game. But one thing that's different about this is you choose... one core concept of Anthem is, like, you are in, like, a Iron Man suit. It's like a very slim mech that you're in, right? And you choose your loadout before you go out into the world, and then you can't change it. You can, like, salvage and pick up guns, but you can't change to them right away, and you can't, like, there's different kind of, like, grenades and power sets and stuff, and you can't swap between them until you get back to the fort.
Do you think does that sound to you, or does it seem like to you that's like a poor design choice, or do you reckon they want people to intentionally sort of have to think in advance what they're going to be going out to the field with?
Yeah, I'm kind of enjoying it at the moment, to be honest. I mentioned it to Shayla, and she was like, that sucks. That's awful. I hate that. Because, you know, it is nice to pick up something and be able to play with it straight away, right? Give it a go. But it's interesting. You go out on an expedition or a free play, more on that later, but anything you pick up, you don't access till you get back to the fort. And also, none of your experience like adds towards your next level or anything until you get back. So I'm not leveling up while I'm out there and able to do new things or getting new perks or anything. Once I get back, it tells me how much experience I earned, and then my little level thing goes up. And most of it's like the level stuff kind of increases your ability to enhance your javelin, which is the name of their like Iron Man suits. So it's not like I've got a new magical power and I can put a point here and I can do something different or whatever. It's now you can tweak your suit in more ways. You can add a different like a component slot, or you have a different weapon slot or whatever it might be.
I don't hate that idea. That
No,
sort of
me either.
getting the XP and stuff at the end. I feel like I remember when they were doing press for this game that they kept talking about like session gameplay, and maybe this is what they meant, that you sort of you go out for these sessions and then at the end of it you get all your rewards. Like I don't hate that, because I kind of like the idea that those two things are split off. You know, that when you're out in the world in Anthem, you're not going to sort of stand still for 5 minutes, like you said, looking at your skill tree, working out like where to put your points or something. That you're out there like exploring, fighting, looting, whatever. And then once you go back to the safe area, that's where you do all your leveling up. I don't hate that idea that they're kind of split.
Yeah, I quite like it, to be honest. Like, I don't know yet if I like it for itself or if I like it as a point of difference to Destiny.
Right.
But I'm not minding it too much at the moment. It's kind of like, it's a level of excitement where I don't know how much experience I've got. And then I get back at the end and it kind of counts it all up and I can see how my fellow squad members did as well. Like, I kind of like going, oh, okay, sick. I earned the second most experience there. I had a good game there, you know. It's like kind of a light competition amongst your cooperative gameplay.
I was just curious, Tim. Does that mean that there's a way that you can somehow abandon the experience you've earned by not making it back to the safe zone or something? Am I misinterpreting that?
I haven't seen it yet. Like, I have been killed and you just respawn. That might affect the experience I got at the end. It doesn't really give you much of a breakdown in terms of kills or anything. I haven't seen that yet, but it's entirely possible, because one like big fault I found with it so far is it's very easy to get kicked from EA servers. It seems like it has an inactivity kick in only maybe 5 minutes. Like, I've left it paused and then been right back at the main menu, not even just like back at the fort or whatever. It happened like a bunch of times, and you know, maybe I need to be focusing on it more, because Destiny's trained me. I can kind of like go to orbit, or I can just sit in a safe spot and put down the controller and go do whatever for a bit. And I was kind of doing that, you know. I was giving the game a go, and then I was like doing a bit of cleaning up or like helping out with the kids or whatever it is, and I kept finding myself back at the menu. And I've been very careful not to do that again since I've kind of like progressed in the game where I have a bit more freedom. But yeah, it's said you've been booted for inactivity a couple of times, and a couple of times it just said could not connect, and I found it only happened when I was paused. I've had no connection problems while I'm playing, which seems odd to me.
I feel like that'd be a massive oversight on EA's part if they, you know, didn't grant you the XP if you got booted.
Yeah.
Especially considering sort of, you know, a bit of the reputation the game has with you know, servers and the launch problems and you know, the technical aspects surrounding some of the problems.
Yeah, and just because, Paul, you mentioned the session gameplay and not minding it, I wanted to explain another facet of that. In that, you know how in Destiny, you kind of open your map, pick a planet, and you can kind of go, I'll start that mission there, or I'll go over here and do that sort of thing. In this, you kind of, from your fort, when you choose to go out into the world, you kind of choose a mission or free play. You can't just like go out into the world and then start a mission or find something and start doing that. Or at least I can't yet. It's either I click, I'm going to do this mission, now send me out to the world, and it puts me in that instance. or I'm going to go to free play, and it's just the big open world, and there's some enemies to kill, and I might find some crates and various minerals to harvest, etc., etc. And I found that a little bit disappointing that the two seem so separate.
Does that mean like if you choose a mission and you complete it, can you do another one, or do you have to go back to base and then start again?
So when you complete a mission, at the end of it, it goes mission ending in 10 seconds, and it counts down, and then it puts you back at kind of like there's kind of like a platform it always starts you on for the missions just outside the fort. And it says it gives you your experience and your play medals and shows you your loot and stuff. And at the end of it, it says, now what do you want to do? Go back to the fort, do another mission, go to free play. But it's not seamless. It'll still, whichever one I choose, I'm going to hit a loading screen before it then puts me to free play, or lets me look at my available missions, or puts me back at the fort.
I wanted to ask you about the gameplay.
Yeah.
Because I don't think, well, actually, no, I know the answer to this. You didn't play Mass Effect Andromeda, because we were talking about this earlier today. You haven't played any of the Mass Effect games yet.
I played a little bit of the first one, and the handling was not good enough for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then I always meant to go back because 2 and 3 had so much acclaim, and I wanted my story to follow through, and I never did it. And the generations went on, and I'm holding out for an HD remaster so that I can do it all.
Right. Well, Mass Effect Andromeda, which I played, when I saw the gameplay demos for Anthem that they did, the gameplay looked so similar between those two games, and both developed by BioWare, published by EA, so there's a lot of overlap there, and it looked like they had used a lot of the same kind of gameplay mechanics in terms of the kind of, you have that suit, you said, like the Javelin or whatever it is in Anthem, where you fly around. In Mass Effect Andromeda, you don't necessarily have a special suit like that, but your character has kind of sci-fi armor which lets you like boost forward and kind of jetpack up into the air temporarily. And it looked like it wasn't exactly the same, but they were very much using a lot of the same ideas for the combat. And, you know, in terms of Mass Effect Andromeda, there's a lot that is wrong with that game, but the moment-to-moment combat was really, really good. And I really enjoyed the kind of the fast-paced kind of real movement-based combat. It's not so much about cover like the other games. You really kind of zip around. I was just curious, like, what's the actual combat like in this? Is it fun?
So I'm really glad you asked that, because I agree with you in terms of your experience with Mass Effect and mine with this. It feels really good to play. There's a lot wrong with it, but just like you said, the combat and the in-the-moment stuff is not one of those problems. Also worth noting here, it looks fantastic. Like, the graphics are great, and I'm not on like a PS4 Pro or anything, but it looks really good. Like, I love how it looks, like everything. The gunplay feels really, I was thinking about this word, I don't know if it's the right word. It feels really tactile. Like, it's not like lasers and stuff like other sci-fi kind of games. It very much feels like I'm firing bullets and assault rifles and stuff like that. And so it's like the really kind of clicky gunshot fire sound when I'm like duk 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 duk, and you know, it feels weighty, and I really enjoy that a lot. I also feel like they've done a good job of making you feel like you were in a heavy metal suit. Like, you move quickly. Like, I've got a little dash thing that lets me move, and I can run quite quickly because it's a powered suit, but it doesn't feel like, say Marvel Spider-Man, when I'm just flinging myself around, or Agile. It feels weighty in the way that it moves and the kind of speed that you turn at. It's got a little bit of if you're someone that gets motion sickness from shooters, this is not going to be your friend. It's kind of got that blur when you're moving from side to side quickly. I tend to always struggle with it at first and then get used to it, but it has that. The suits, the flying is so seamless. This is like a prototype for how to make an Iron Man game, but the world is great for it. So it's a massive, like, really multi-dimensional map in terms of height and depth and width. Like, you can fly to anywhere, and you can use your jets underwater as well. So these maps have a lot going for them, and you feel weighty in the air as well. You can
Does that
turn fairly quickly, but like, it's very easy to bang into a wall if you're not paying attention because it is a heavy suit with just like boosters on the bottom.
I'm actually really happy to hear about the way you're describing in terms of that word weighty. Like it's it's a funny descriptor when you're talking about a video game, but I'm sure everyone knows exactly what you mean by that, because there are so many games that are great games, and when you especially talking about, say, like anything that involves machinery or like technology, like guns, or like you said, armor suits, or maybe a car or something, that weightiness is really what like sells the deal, and obviously how things move. Like for instance, really quickly, um, when I play Armor, as much as I love that game, nothing feels weighty. Things feel like you're wielding a gun made out of, polygons. The representation is there, but I feel no weight in the weapon. Like it just doesn't have it there.
It,
And it's
it
one of the big downfalls of that game for me. So I'm glad to hear that that's something that they're sort of, they've managed to put in the game convincingly for you.
it'd be a really interesting kind of science and mathematics to it, like I guess what it comes down to is a slight drag in I want to go this way, and it just takes a fraction of a second to pick up on that movement, and that makes it feel heavy to you.
Well, you see, the thing is that Armor has that. It has weapon sway, and it has those, strange ballistics and the way things behave. But for some reason, I'm not sure if it's the sound design or things don't, I can't put my finger on it, but it just doesn't have it there like it does in some other games. But yeah, I definitely know that exact feeling. And sometimes you just get that's like, it can make or break gunplay in some games.
I know the feeling you're talking about when it comes to like guns as well. You say like the guns feel weighty, like and JT, you said the guns feel in Armor. You're saying they don't have that kind of weight to them. Like I feel like it's also just it can be just as simple as a little bit of recoil on a gun and things like that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like I kind of see what you guys are saying. It's like it's difficult to kind of describe this stuff, and none of us actually being computer programmers or in any way, like we kind of don't really know how this stuff exactly works. But it might be just as simple as like a little bit of recoil on a gun makes it feel like it has weight, whereas a gun with no recoil just feels like you said, JT, like you're just holding a bunch of polygons that shoot another polygon out.
Yeah, and not to go too deep into it, but for me, I think maybe with a game like Armor, not to take it too much away from Anthem, but it's also the way your character moves with the weapon. And in Armor, he still they still sort of move generally at the same speed. Things play out and animations play out the same as they would with any gun. Whereas maybe in Anthem, the developers have taken time to make sure that each gun has an individual characteristic or animation to how things work when you're moving around with it or aiming it, and that I'm sure the devil is in the details there. I'm sure it's all comes down to those very, very subtle things that are really difficult to pick up on as to what
Yeah.
makes something work in that way.
That kind of the weightiness and the feeling like you're like really putting effort into your movements and your decisions ultimately comes together to make you feel very satisfied when you pull together a pretty cool move. Like going from running to flying to some of the different javelins kind of like float just above the ground, kind of like air gliding sort of thing, and combining those with melee attacks and shooting on the run, or like stopping mid-flight to shoot someone from up high and then zooming down and using your ultimate attack, they call it. It's like your super overpowered one you can only do every 6 minutes while it recharges. It feels very satisfying when you put together like a nice sequence of combat, and I think
Right.
that's really important, because there's a very fine line between just feeling like I can run through everything risk-free, just tossing grenades and using my powers and making everything explode and then run out the other side, versus I'm not that quick, but I can, if I think about it, I can put together a sequence here that's going to do maximum damage and take minimal damage to myself, and then we'll see where we are, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's always important, and I'm sure like that's one of the big things in a game like that that the designers are going to take into account is how can we make this satisfying for the player to not just the end game and getting rewards and things like that, but how can we make the game at a micro level like enjoyable to play. But I mean, one thing I kind of want to steer this conversation one direction, sorry, I want to steer this conversation to real quick is uh, where do I start? BioWare as a developer, they started out really, really, really very, very well known, well respected, and it almost seems like in recent memory, I think Paul, you played through the last Mass Effect game, which was also a little bit of a bit of a developmental flop, and then you've got things like this. I mean, what are your thoughts on where such a good developer is going with when they're sort of releasing games that are, at least in the community eye, a bit subpar compared to what people expect from them?
Well, there is an excellent piece of investigative journalism published by Kotaku about exactly that, and it came out kind of after Anthem, but considered Mass Effect Andromeda as well, and it really discussed the development for all of these. It looked like it was a long piece, and they almost in a way got lucky that everything went to hell because they had been there to see what was happening. And the way it's described, JT, to answer your question, is that while they were very respected with your Dragon Ages and your Mass Effects, they kind of, didn't have the best practices or best organization or even best leadership when they were doing those games. But things kind of came together because they had a bit more freedom when it came to time and personnel and stuff. And they were doing less because they were a smaller company. And they kind of came together, and it taught the leadership the wrong lesson. They would say like it's the BioWare magic. It always just comes together at the end, and they would rely on it just coming together at the end. And then doing this with EA had a lot of expectations and would kind of swan in and be like, the flying's the thing, make it work. And they'd already abandoned flying for this game. They weren't going to have it. So all of a sudden, they had to go back and make sure that worked. And then it got announced at EA, and half the team didn't even know it was called Anthem until it got announced. They weren't even decided on a name. That's how kind of ramshackle the thing was.
Yikes.
It's a lot of bad business practices. A lot of developers quit. A lot of the higher up quit. They were under a lot of scrutiny for the treatment of their staff and stuff like that. So I think it's not like they were doing things perfectly for the other games, and then something's changed. It's more like the bad stuff caught up with them, and it came to the forefront, I suppose. But I really urge you, JT, and anyone else to read that Kotaku article. I read it in like 4 sittings because it is a long one, but it is eye-opening, expertly researched and written, and just really interesting. And it's not just like sitting there dunking on BioWare or EA for that matter, or either of the games. It's kind of just going like, look, this is kind of really sad that all these things had to happen before people started paying attention to perhaps they're not going about it the right way.
Yeah, it's a really good read, and like you kind of said at the end to me, it's like, it's not just saying like EA bad, ruin game, that kind of thing. It's a lot more nuanced than that, which, as far as I'm concerned, it always is. But sort of back to your question, JT, I played Mass Effect Andromeda, which I mentioned briefly before, and it's like that had some really good stuff in it. Like we were talking about the combat before in Anthem. The combat in Mass Effect Andromeda is really fun. Like, the game looks great. I know a lot of people had issues, graphical glitches with that, but I think sort of in general the sort of design of the game is really good. But the game had a lot of issues, which I to me was sort of more about maybe blandness rather than any huge actual problems in the way perhaps Anthem has had. But in terms of BioWare more generally, it's weird that it's not weird, but after all these things, they've just kind of gone a bit silent for a while, right? Like, there were hints in Andromeda there were hints in the game about what like the DLC would be, and then all that just got cancelled. And obviously Anthem was supposed to be their next big thing, and that comes out, and then they've just kind of they're remaking that game, so we haven't heard anything about it. And I feel like the only thing that is kind of new coming from them, apart from maybe a remade Anthem, is there's these hints. I think it's been announced, but we've got no details of a new Dragon Age. And beyond that, there's nothing. There's no sense that we're going to get like more of the Mass Effect Andromeda storyline or anything like that. They just kind of have retreated, and I wonder whether maybe that's good. Like I'm glad that we haven't just had a BioWare game every 18 months since Mass Effect or something like that, because I feel like we would have just got more crappy games.
I guess the takeaway can sometimes be, you know, it's a bit of a cautionary tale when you've got the respect as a developer BioWare had, and people were saying things like BioWare will never do any wrong by, you know, in terms of making a game, it will always be good. Don't worry. And I guess that's kind of what you were mentioning, Timmy, in a sense, is that they kind of had that even as the developers themselves were
They
like,
had the
yeah,
same mentality, yeah.
yeah, the same mentality. It will all come together. But yeah.
Well, while we're talking about BioWare specifically and how they do things, I want to take it back to Anthem just briefly before we finish up with this one, because I've spoken a lot about how this is very similar to Destiny in a lot of ways. But they do a few things that I really enjoyed that kind of gave it a bit more of a BioWare feel. And the first thing is they've given your character an actual voice. So unlike in Destiny and kind of games in that vein where you're kind of like everyone talks to you and you were kind of voiceless, so as not to speak for you, your character just speaks to the people around them. And I really like that. The voice acting is great. And the facial graphics, really good as well. I guess that was important for them to nail after Andromeda kind of copped a bit of flack. But this all looks really good. And the voice acting's great. I'm pretty picky with voice acting. I feel like Naughty Dog have set a really high bar, so a lot of games kind of fall short. But they do a really good job in this one. I'm enjoying it so far. Dialogue's decent, and you even get dialogue options. As yet, I am unsure whether they actually affect anything. You know, sometimes I'll say something and it'll say like I've earned a bit of trust for the freelancers or whatever. Or they feel like I'm supporting them, whatever they might be, an arcanist or whatever. But I'm not sure if that would have happened anyway throughout that conversation, so it's a bit hard to tell. But I like having the dialogue options. I like being able to, you know, sometimes be a bit flippant or be a bit supportive. There was one guy that was telling me a story about making it out of the big precursor event that happened years ago that kind of set up the world as it is right now. And he was kind of talking about how he was in it for himself and he was setting himself up as a survivor. And I chose all the dialogue options that were kind of like, you let people die for your own gain kind of thing. And I could have very easily been like, wow, I admire you for surviving kind of thing. So there's at least options in how the dialogue plays out. I don't know if that's going to have any gameplay ramifications, but it's nice to at least feel like I'm involved in my character's interactions.
I know we mentioned Mass Effect a couple times before, but if we do get that HD or just sort of, you know, remaster of the Mass Effect series, Timmy, I feel like you're really going to love, especially 2 and 3, because it's going to have this stuff, but it will mean something.
Yeah, for sure.
I've always stood by Mass Effect as being maybe the other space opera IP apart from Star Wars and maybe Fifth Element that I absolutely love, and the universe is just incredible. So absolutely play it.
Well, yeah, I guess like we've spoken about Anthem for a long time here, so I might leave it now. But I just did want to mention as well, the map design so far seems incredible. Like I said, because they have to be really tall and really deep and wide. I am in no way familiar with any of the map yet because it just feels like I can just zoom through it flying, so I don't need to take the time, but I can if I want. And the cool thing is, this made me realize a shortcoming of Destiny, there's wildlife all over this world I'm on. Some of it will attack on sight, some of it doesn't care about you, some of it will scatter if you shoot at it, some of it will engage you if you shoot at it. There are of course your enemy factions and stuff like that, but I'm really enjoying having this world that feels like a real inhabited world. And I didn't realize that I was missing that in Destiny until I was like, oh, wow, look at these weird monkey things. Oh, wow, look at that big kind of elephant rhino hybrid thingy.
Nothing makes a game like a weird monkey.
That's exactly right. This one has like a multicolored feather for a tail. It's radical.
And speaking, oh, sorry, I'll do it again. Make a note. It's because I started off too quiet.
For the
Yeah.
record, JT specifically asked to do the segue.
In the chat, he said, "Can I do the segue?" I said, JT, can
Well,
you?
I had it all planned out. Like I was like, oh my god, he just mentioned, living, breathing, inhabited world, and I was like, all right, this is the perfect chance to jump into Rockstar Games, who are very, very well known for making games that have very, very convincing inhabited, living, breathing worlds, and that's something that Paul, I know you have been getting into, and I have been getting into as well. So you've been playing a bit of an older one by them. Can you tell us a bit about that?
I have started playing Red Dead Redemption 1, which I always wanted to play, and I always just was waiting for that PC port to come out. Just like all of the GTA games before, right? They come out on console, and then eventually they get ported to PC. And this always happens with every GTA game. And for whatever reason, it just never happened with Red Dead 1. And I put it off and put it off and put it off. And by the time it was clear that it wasn't coming to PC, the world had moved on. And I didn't go back and play it. So, a bit more free time on my hands now. I've decided to actually go back and play this. Also because, Timmy, you played Red Dead 2, and so did another friend of mine, Flynn, which you guys know, has also played it recently, and both of you said it was amazing. And
I'm so curious to hear your thoughts, because I bounced off of Red Dead 1 originally when it came out and absolutely adored Red Dead 2. So I'm so curious to hear if I need to give it another chance.
I'm also curious, very, very quickly, Paul. So did Red Dead 1 actually end up coming out on PC?
No.
Okay, so you've jumped just onto playing on Xbox, I'm assuming.
Yeah, well, it got a kind of a little bit of an update for Xbox One. So it came out on 360, and then it got a backwards compatibility patch for Xbox One. And that patch, it definitely did more than just make it run on Xbox One. I don't know whether the textures are slightly up-resed or things are a bit sharper or the frame rate's a bit better, but it's definitely better now that it was originally on 360. And like, I guess to jump into the game and my general sense of it so far, JT, you mentioned before about the kind of Rockstar world, and I'd probably disagree a little bit when you said they sort of make these deep and believable lived-in worlds, because my sort of take on the Rockstar open world has always been that it's just kind of skin deep, that it looks amazing across the whole thing, but if you actually try and interact with anything, you can't really do that much, So if we're comparing it to like Elder Scrolls and stuff, you can't pick up the items, even if compared to Witcher, you can't like loot things, not that you'd need to in GTA or Red Dead, but they're kind of these huge open worlds that look amazing, but you can't actually interact a huge amount with them once you really get down to it. This is kind of the same, I think. Like it's a standard Rockstar world. It looks amazing. There's a great sense of scale. Like even for an old game, I constantly find myself kind of scaling a large sort of hill or a mountain and just looking out over, the Wild West, spreading out to the horizon. And it has a lot of really great moments like that. And kind of the tone and the atmosphere is really good. It has that slower pace that I always hear people talk about in the Red Dead games. And, being a combination of traveling by horse rather than by car, and I guess the setting of it being early 19th century Wild West, it's just, things are a bit more kind of slower paced compared to driving in what's basically like a Ferrari around New York in GTA, things like that. But the music is also kind of more subdued, whereas in GTA, I know, JT, you're going to maybe talk about GTA in a bit, but I feel like GTA wants you to be going at full speed with like, metal or hip hop or something just blaring as loud as it can from its licensed soundtrack. Whereas Red Dead, I'll be kind of, slowly walking through the Wild West, and there'll just be like someone slowly plucking a guitar, and that will be the only music that I get. And it all kind of comes together really nicely to sort of set the tone, which I really appreciate. And I feel in general, and I've sort of got more to say about this, it feels a bit more mature, and I don't know how people feel about using that word for this, a bit more mature than the GTA series, in the sense that, like, they're not trying to offend anyone every 5 seconds in Red Dead, and it's not kind of like, look how big and crazy everything is. It's just like, they just give you like a huge Wild West like plain and some subdued music in the background, and then a kind of a horse to ride across it. And it's like, you just have to appreciate that that's what the game is.
Yeah, like, in many ways, GTA as a series is kind of like South Park, but maybe not even as smart, you know?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I just wanted to drop in that, yeah, I do really appreciate about the Red Dead franchise that because, horses don't have inbuilt radios, they are forced to kind of have a score, and
Yep.
they use that score so effectively. Like, I know of moments in the first one that you perhaps aren't up to yet, so I won't mention them, where the score is, it's almost iconic in video games, the score in certain parts of that first game. But there were so many points in the Red Dead 2 that I can't imagine what I would have felt without the score, because they were so perfectly paired and they absolutely set the tone and were emotive for what your character was going through, whether it was like, just a lonely, slow stroll with your horse and someone plucking a guitar, like you mentioned, or something with some strings or something a bit more going on. Like, they really they they nail the scores with that. Also, worth mentioning, JT, I want to hear about the GTA world if you talk about that later. But Red Dead 2 feels absolutely lived in and interactive, and yeah, so I'm interested to hear more about how you found the world, Paul, because that's not something I came up against in Red Dead 2, and it might be, technological implications, but yeah.
Right. I know you and I probably have different ideas about open worlds in general.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're not a big fan of the Elder Scrolls ones. But yeah, like the world is the world feels lived in that sense. But I guess you go into a town and you realize that there are 3 buildings out of 15 that you can do anything with at all. And I guess it's that kind of thing. It's like, if you ride into a town in Red Dead, in this one that I'm playing, and all you want to do is pick up the next mission and go and buy some ammo, it may as well be real. But if you wanted to like walk into a different building or do anything that wasn't those specific things, there's no leeway for that anywhere. And that's kind of what I find that with Rockstar games, that if you go into the cities in GTA, it's like, it's a huge city with however many million people, but you can enter a clothes store and a gun store, and that's kind of it. But in terms of what I've played so far, I'm kind of trying to move through the story fairly briskly, because the game is many years old. It is dated in a number of ways, and I kind of just want to get through it to play Red Dead 2. I have found myself enjoying it enough that I do just sort of stop to hunt animals and things like that, just because kind of the mood of the game is just kind of so intoxicating when I'm just out in the kind of middle of the Wild West, that it just kind of gets to me sometime, and I'm supposed to be on a mission, and I decide, like, I'm just going to stop and like shoot birds for a while and then take their feathers so I can sell them for a little bit of money. But the story in general, which is what I'm kind of going through so far, it's pretty standard. Like, there's nothing amazing about it. It's like a Western movie. The voice acting is exceptionally good. I can't think of the last game I played that had voice acting that was this good, which I think has always been a high mark for Rockstar games. The one thing that is bothering me a little, and I think I asked you about this with Red Dead 2, Timmy, is it has this honor system in the game where you can kind of help people and you gain honor, or you kill people or do bad stuff and you lose honor and you become basically like an outlaw. And
Yeah.
I feel like so far there's a bit of like narrative dissonance between these things, where it gives you the option to be an outlaw, but the story missions do not reflect that in any way whatsoever. So it's like every story mission is you being a good guy, and on the side it's like, oh, you can rob people, you can murder people, you can do all these kinds of stuff, but as soon as you pick up a story mission, you absolutely have to play the good guy every time. And I don't know, it's just, I feel like with the GTA games, obviously they don't have an honor system in that sense, but because they're a bit less serious and they're not so kind of sincere about the tone of the game, that you're a criminal anyway, so then if you want to go on a huge killing spree and like rob a plane and crash it into like a train or something like that, you can just do that, and it just kind of works within the game. Whereas in this, it feels like it's like, oh yeah, you can be an outlaw, but if you actually want to finish the game, then you can't be an outlaw. And it's I don't know, there's something a bit weird there. Like I said, it's a bit of a like dissonance between gameplay and narrative.
So yeah, they still definitely have that in Red Dead 2. They have, it's like the slider on the bottom, white hat, black hat, right?
Right.
But I largely ignored it anyway because, you know, I didn't want to play to try and get to one end of the scale. You know, I didn't mind it popping up every now and again and seeing kind of where I was, but I wasn't playing to change it. But it didn't have that problem in Red Dead 2 because you, as a career and part of your living, you are in a band of outlaws. You're just a roving band of men who live outside the law. Like, you're not always doing the wrong thing, you know, but the way you make your means is that you hear about a delivery of gold going past or leathers or whatever, and you're going to try and hold it up. And the game gives you a lot more gray area. Like, you know, it gives you, you know, much more side quests to go and collect on debts, or, you know, you can do robberies as an actual side quest, not just like a in the moment I'm going to hold this person up kind of thing. And it also within the story missions goes, a lot of the time it'll be like, all right, we're going to clear out of here, you decide what to do with them. And so you can opt to no witnesses, or you can opt for leaving them tied up, or you can let them go, or whatever it might be. So there's a lot more gray area even within the story missions, within what you can choose to do, and also just your core starting point of living as someone outside the law, but not necessarily like an evil, bad person. You have that wiggle room, so you can really play it either way.
Right. Well, I guess in this one, the starting point is that you kind of roll into town to help out the law. So there's probably more to it. Like, I'm probably only 3 or 4 hours in, so maybe there's more to it as it goes on. But at this point, it's like I'm helping the sheriff, and I'm helping the woman who owns the farm, and just kind of doing good guy stuff all over the place, which I don't mind. Like, I'm fine with like that being the story they're telling. But it seems weird that then outside that, it kind of like almost encourages you to like, yeah, go and be an outlaw, go and do bad stuff. But then, yeah, you know what I mean? It's a bit jarring at the moment, but we'll see how it goes.
Look, can I say one thing that I hope doesn't flavor your playthrough? But hearing you remind me that the first thing you're doing is helping the law, and that all of the story missions are kind of pushing you towards being a good guy. Given what I know about the characters from Red Dead 2 and everything, because Red Dead 2 is a prequel, I find that so interesting, and this has got me much more interested in going back if I ever have an Xbox again.
I guess the only other thing I wanted to mention was just quickly on the gameplay, which is, you know, it plays like GTA, just I guess a little bit slower. You know, you don't have machine guns, that kind of thing. I really appreciate the Deadeye mode, as they call it, which is like the bullet time slow-mo thing, which from memory is in GTA 5, I think, JT. I can't remember whether that's in GTA 4, but I really appreciate that because I am awful at shooters on a gamepad. So I have the auto lock set to the absolute highest, and I'm just, you know, I'm looking for all the things that keep my Deadeye meter up so that I can make it as easy as possible. But the shooting is kind of nice, like just a little bit back to what you were talking about with Anthem, Timmy, about sort of weight and kind of, you said sort of tactileness of shooting. I get a bit of that with this because, you know, your guns, I guess the game kind of makes them automatic in a sense for gameplay purposes, but because you're shooting a bit slower than you would in a GTA game, because things aren't as modern, it's like gunshots feel like they have a bit of punch to them. And when I get into a gunfight, it's not like sort of bullets flying around everywhere with grenades and rocket launchers and things like that. It's like every shot seems to matter a bit, which is kind of cool. I quite like that sort of stripped back feel.
in Red Dead 2, kind of the auto aim is pretty helpful in that, like, if you kind of have your what's it called, reticle kind of
Mhm.
near somebody and you're in cover and you come out of cover, it'll kind of snap to them. Does Red Dead 1 have that?
Yeah, the normal setting is like if you're near someone, it snaps to them. And I've got it on the setting now where it's just if you pull your sights up, it automatically snaps to the nearest person. Like
Oh, okay.
I just have it on that one. Like I'm bad with it, and I got no time to learn. I'm not interested.
That's, yeah, no worries. I like, as much as the gunfire and stuff is fun in those games, it almost feels more about like the situations you're in that are requiring you to be in a gunfight is like the fun part, like
Yep.
they do their action set pieces quite well in those games. So it's like you'll shoot for a while and then someone gets on a horse and takes off. So all of a sudden it's a chase or they're on a wagon or something. It's less about the satisfying gunplay itself and more about the action set pieces.
I 100% agree. And even with like the GTA games, I always felt the same way that like you I don't want to ever feel like I'm not kind of just kicking ass through all of these, as you say, action set pieces, because they're all just kind of set up like that. They're all set up for you to like, it's you and it's 10 other dudes, and I've got to like drop them all with one shot and just move through. And I think the game plays so much better when I'm not having to like fiddle back and forth with my analog stick trying to make sure it's on the guy and stuff like that. So yeah, I totally agree with you on kind of the scenarios being the thing that's fun about that. Last thing I just wanted to say on Red Dead, I'll have more once I play it a bit more in future. We didn't quite get through without a Witcher 3 reference, because I really appreciate that this game has the kind of auto ride when you hold down one of the buttons when you're on your horse with like another person next to you. I really appreciate that when it's doing that Rockstar thing where you're traveling from one mission to another and they're giving you exposition during travel time, which is like the most Rockstar quest structure ever. You just hold, it's A or one of the triggers or something like that, and your horse just matches the speed and the direction of the person you're riding with, and you can just spin your camera around and look at the scenery. And I massively appreciate that. I loved it in Witcher. I love just being able to kind of hold down that button and you stick to the road, and then you can just look around and kind of admire things. In a game that's kind of this scenic and has this kind of scale and world design, I think that's a thing that all games like that should do. Give us chances to just appreciate the world.
Yeah, that's absolutely one of the better things about those games for sure, because it is so scenic. And like you don't want to, and I remember that first one, there were a few glitches with the horses and it can be a bit finicky. So that option to just, I'm just going to hold this down and sit back. Absolutely. Such a good call.
So yeah, I've been playing Red Dead, but JT, you have been playing the other side of the Rockstar studio, which is GTA 5, I think.
Yes. So you've been playing Grand Theft Horse. I've been playing Grand Theft Auto.
Exactly.
Yeah. Look, I don't want to go into it too much because you can sort of talk a lot about Rockstar games and sort of hit the same things. From Red Dead to GTA 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. I've been a big fan of GTA games since number 1, which is back when it first came out with the it wasn't isometric,
The top down.
The top down view.
Yeah.
And number 2, 3, Vice City, loved all those games. The only game I had never got into was 4, because it just for some reason never ever worked on my computer ever. Like it actually didn't work on 2 of my computers, and so
4
I just
was
kind of
the
gave
one
up.
I played the most.
Yeah, and I know it's meant to be like for a lot of people, it's actually still the hallmark of the entire GTA series. Some people would say it's actually better than 5 in a lot of ways, but yeah, I just never, for technical reasons, never ever got to really play it outside of going to your house, Paul. And we used to do that thing where you glitched cars or the guy into the swing, and it would fling him off for like kilometers into the air.
You glitched like a bicycle into a swing.
Yeah,
and it would do a weird thing where I don't know what the game thought it was doing, because it would make a gunshot sound at some point, and then your character would fly just like hundreds of meters into the air across the city.
And they never patched it out, which makes me think it was either intentional or they were just like, hey, people are having fun with this. Let's not get rid of it. But number 5, I mean, I guess I have some reservations with it, but that's sort of more to do with the online play, because I actually have played 5 a fair bit in online on PS3, but I want to sort of more talk about the single player story mode, which I guess is what the game was made or based around for the most part. And I've recently got the PC version, so I've been able to max out the graphics and have all the bells and whistles on it. I guess it's essentially a remaster when it came out on Xbox One, PS4, and PC. And I've just really been liking it. And I guess like to sort of go back to the living, breathing, sort of lived-in world scenario. I understand what you mean by it going sort of only skin deep, and I do tend to agree with that. It's not like Skyrim where people have a shop and like a dedicated schedule, and each character has their own little life. But I feel like that in GTA 5 that's sort of irrelevant. What I more mean is that it's a very, very convincing city. It's aesthetically convincing. You can stand on the corner of basically any street in the game, and if you stay there for like a cycle of a day, it is never repetitive. A different person will pass with a different conversation. I don't know how many lines of dialogue they recorded for this game. It must be through the roof, like absolutely through the roof, because even when I was playing online, I never heard the same dialogue piece be repeated. Different sort of things happen all the time, even if you're still standing in that one spot. But, like a car chase will go past. Sometimes a car chase will go past and they'll catch the guy and he'll run out of the car and they'll have to chase him down, and you can help chase them down and not get in trouble. Like that kind of thing happens all the time. Like not to the point where it's excessive, but just there's just these little things that are always happening.
I did always love that in the GTA games, you can get a taxi and then you can just like pick people up and take them to places and earn completely insignificant amounts of money doing that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it gives you that little bit of an option to play the sort of everyday man, even though you're the main overarching theme is, get lots of money, become a kingpin kind of thing. But the other thing that has really, really impressed me is the emergent and reactive gameplay. So, I mean, GTA games have sort of always been known for emergent gameplay, things sort of happening as a result of something that maybe the player has done or something that has happened at some point in the game, and then they're essentially being a continuation of an event throughout the game. That happens all the time. But the reactive element is especially interesting, and that is mostly noticed in the stock market system. So there's 2 stock markets. You can, for anyone who hasn't played GTA 5, you've got a phone, and on the phone you can go to the internet. It has its entire sort of little internet, and with lots of websites and things. But you can go to your stock markets, and the stock markets have all the different businesses that are in the game, and things the player does throughout the game, whether it be, say, a jewelry heist, which I just finished. If you invest all your money into you do the jewelry heist, and then you notice that the stocks have completely crashed for that company, and then you buy them all up as a result of the heist you've done. Or if you go around, maybe say, knocking off a bunch of the armored cars that take all the money for the banks around, the stock will decrease for those for whatever bank you're knocking off. Like things like that happen, whether it be like a petrol station store chain that you're robbing. Small events like that will have an effect on the stock market, and that you can then play, and then maybe play competitors off against each other. It takes it a step further with having two stock markets. So there's the LCN and the BAWSAQ. If you say that out, that's actually just says ballsack, which I think is pretty funny. But the LCN is the in-game story mode driven things handled by the game and the AI. The ballsack is an interactive one that is all based on the player's online actions. And that spills over into your story mode. Whether you're playing online mode or not, you can invest and have changes made based on what people are doing in the outside of the story. And I think that's just such a cool little sort of detail to put in the game that you can look at forums, and sometimes people get together and they try and make changes happen in the online aspect, and then people in the story mode can then take advantage of that. And that's exactly what it was designed for. So I think that's a really, really cool sort of idea they've put in the game.
So sorry, are you saying that the GTA Online gameplay and world affects your single player instance as far as the stock market goes?
Yes, and one of the stock markets. There's two. There's the online one, which you can invest in, and the single player story mode one, which is affected by the player's actions in story mode. But if I want to make money, yes,
but both are available in story mode, right? Okay,
yeah.
interesting.
So if I want to make some more money for my single player character, as well as an online character, if I so choose to do that, but in my story mode, it will see the effects of the online stock market. And I can invest in that. And that's the stock market that I don't know what's going to happen in. So
that's really interesting.
Really, really cool little thing. Something I never really noticed when I played the GTA Online back in 2013, 2014.
It seems to me almost wasted, in GTA 5. I guess it's like, Paul, you and I were kind of having a chat offline, I think, about perhaps aging out of GTA appeal, like a lot of it was probably unfair of me to compare it to South Park because we both still quite enjoy that, but it is that kind of crude, almost like it's setting out to offend kind of sense of humor. And I guess when done well, I don't mind it, but GTA just it's so constant that it kind of becomes a bit grating for me. And also, it's one of those jack of all trades, master of none kind of games, where it's like
very much so, yeah.
It's cool. It's cool that you can get in any car and go tearing around the city, but the cars don't handle that well, right? They handle good for a GTA game, and they've always been getting better, but they don't handle that good in comparing them to other car games. And the gunplay, it's pretty good, but it's not as good as games that are dedicated to doing that either. So it's kind of it's this blend, and it can't do any as good as other games. So the appeal kind of starts to dwindle for me. But stuff like that, I find it so interesting. And I love the Red Dead, so I'm always going to have time for what Rockstar are doing next. And I'm very curious for them to try their hand at something different again, because they've kind of really stuck to GTA in the last decade, and they've thrown in Red Dead 2, which is great. But they were doing stuff like Bully back in the day,
Right.
And I'd love
and
to see them.
Didn't they make a table tennis game?
I have no idea.
Really?
Maybe.
Pretty sure they made a serious table tennis sports game.
Amazing.
So I've got a last question for you, JT. It's kind of springboarding off what you were saying, Timmy, about the story, because I kind of a little bit in the same place you are, that I really like I do like the worlds, and that stuff you're talking about, JT, the kind of emerging gameplay of Rockstar games is amazing. And I love just kind of playing around in a Rockstar world. And I played through all of GTA 5, and I really enjoyed all that stuff in the world. But I felt, the same thing you said, Timmy. I felt like the story just didn't do it for me anymore for the reasons that you said. And of course, GTA 5 has this 3 characters thing, and you bounce between them. I was just curious, JT, what you think of kind of that gameplay thing, the three characters you have and how you bounce between them and whether you thought that was working. Because I kind of found that it made me just care less. Like, my takeaway was always that this game should actually have 3 campaigns, not one that was split into 3, because it just didn't really work for me.
Yeah, I tend to agree with the story thing as well, simply because, as someone who loves realism in games, like GTA is a far departure from that for a lot of the things I really, really like. And the story, I mean, GTA as a whole, I mean, it really is just, it's meant to be exaggerated, and the stories are really just out there, and it's always going to be playing on, like, you know, a character trait or a stereotype, and that's sort of all the story does. So I definitely don't play it for that, but I do play the story just to progress the rest of the game. As for the character switching, I'm I'm really not sure where I'm at with it. Like, I probably would prefer just to have one character, I think. It can sort of get a bit disjointed in some of the side missions you're doing. Like, a lot of the side missions and characters you meet have their own little story arcs, and having 3 people with a whole bunch of all of those sort of starts to get towards Game of Thrones territory, where you've got a billion different characters and you're like, hang on, who was that person again? Why are they in my phone? And so I don't like it for that reason. It can become a little bit confusing to track what you have and haven't done with each character. And yeah, I agree. Like, it would make more sense just to put more in the game in the way of one character with a lot more campaign or storyline, or maybe flesh it out even more than it would just to have the 3 different characters. But I think back then they were just sort of, they want to do something a bit different that they haven't done before in most of the other GTA games.
They did this thing at the end of GTA 4, which was called, I can't remember what it was called, like Liberty City Stories or something, because that's where it was set. And they released like 2 mini campaigns. And one you played as like a biker, and the other one you played as like a guy who owned a nightclub. And they were both like really, really well received. And it was just the world of GTA 4, but a mini campaign and completely different stories in both. And I played those and felt like, this is the future of GTA. Like, build a huge, massive open world and then tell little stories throughout it, as, you know, like as DLC, as expansions and things like that. And I guess I was always just kind of disappointed when 5 came out and they just had one big story again. I don't know, it felt like they'd really hit on something there with the Liberty City stories, and then it just kind of it went away. Actually, they might have been called something else, but yeah, it was GTA 4.
And also with the GTA 5 thing, like, they never even really continued to pursue that thing with the story mode. In terms of the DLC and extra content, all they did was drop it all. They put all their chips into the online thing, and they're still releasing online content, DLC, like small DLCs or little packs with different missions and things. But the story mode just got none of that. I think it can get some of the cars and things like that from those packs appear in story mode, but that's it.
That's where the money is, right?
Yeah, basically. And so I'm a bit disappointed that it didn't get the same love that the online mode has continued to receive.
Yeah, I mean, like, we might be being kind of like Grinches here, right? Because like the 3-story thing was, I think, generally really well received. Everyone I spoke to kind of loved it, and they would always be like, "Oh, it's so funny. Whenever you swap back to this character, he's always like coming out of a strip club or beating the crap out of a guy or rah 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 rah," which is, you know, the exact appeal the GTA games go for. But I felt the same. I'm sure when you are not playing story missions and you can swap between the characters at will, you know, there is some appeal to being able to change up your area and what you're doing and your contacts and all that. But when I was playing the game, I always found like, okay, now it's moved me to this guy, but like things were just heating up with my guy over here, or I held off going and getting this thing I wanted to do with him until I finished my story mission, and it's jumped me across now. You know, like,
yeah, in
I
retrospect,
think there was more drawback to it.
Yeah, I think in retrospect, you know, maybe when it first came out, it got the praise. That's sweet. But in retrospect, after all these years, maybe it sort of just hinders a bit of the progress a little bit. based on sort of what you were saying there and what I've experienced, it
And
makes hard to catch up with what's going on sometimes.
And also, I'm totally with you in that I'm sick of online getting all the love because I'm just sitting here waiting for Red Dead 2 DLC. I just want something else to do in that game, man.
Well, I guess they're going to drop some kind of zombie thing again, right? Like that was one of the cooler things about number one was when they dropped
that undead nightmare.
the undead nightmare thing. I think got really, really good reviews and people loved that.
But I want more real story narrative. I don't want just like a cool let's shoot some zombies, you know. I can play a zombie game for that.
That's fair. The last thing I wanted to say about GTA and that 3 point of view storyline, the place where it really came together, and I have to give it full credit, is when you do the heists, which happen sort of periodically throughout the main story. Those, I know that online they're supposed to be really good because you each take like a part of the heist to do yourself.
Yeah.
But I really loved them in the main quest, the way that, you know, you'd have one character who was like breaching into the bank, and then a different character would be, you'd switch to them halfway through, and you'd have to steal like the getaway car and drive that up to the right place, and then you'd have like the other character has to fly a plane to pick them up when they land in the getaway car, and that all that stuff was really cool. Like that was, I almost got the feeling that was the idea. You know, they were like, oh, we could do these heists where you play as different things, and then, you know, we'll just do that over the whole main quest. Whereas, like, you know, that was the idea that made it worthwhile.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the heists so far, and the planning of them as well. Gives you a lot of choices on how you want to execute them. So, yeah, heists have been great.
Well, we're running way over time for the first part of this podcast, more so than we normally do. So we're gonna all go and catch our breath, and then we'll be back to talk about a couple more games at least. Alright, so we are back after a longer than expected discussion there into a few of those games. I feel like we went on a lot of tangents in the last almost hour and a half on, you know, BioWare and what we want out of a GTA game. We went all over the place.
It just comes with the territory, right? Like, you know, we were like, oh, we're only going to talk about GTA and Red Dead for like, you know, we don't have too much to talk about, but, you know, they're massive open world games, and there's just so much in the games to talk about. So, yeah.
Yeah, massive open world discussions. Well, besides those, I think a couple of us have been playing a couple of other things. And JT, we know you're big into those shooters, and I think you've got one to tell us about.
Sure do. And more on that is, I really like my realistic shooters, or my mil sims as they're called. And I've been playing something called Postscriptum, which is a World War II squad realism sort of game, I guess. But if it's the game that most people would be familiar with, which this game would be similar to, is an older game called Day of Defeat, which was like the World War II Counter-Strike.
That's right. It was a mod, wasn't it?
Yeah, Day of Defeat was a mod, and I think it got released as Day of Defeat Source a little bit later. And this is sort of, I guess, the next generation of that kind of gameplay, that sort of conquest, capture points sort of gameplay. However, this game is very, very realistic. It's based or made by the people who do a modern version of it called Squad, which is sort of set in, you know, Ukraine, Eastern Europe, and in the Middle East. So it's got that kind of gameplay. But this being World War II, has your historical sort of battles. And recently I got the game as part of a deal for them promoting a new part of the game, which is I think it's called the Day of Days, which introduces the Normandy landings as maps. So it's got your Utah Beach, and not Omaha, but Utah, which was very similar. And I love this game. Like, it ticks all the boxes for me. Probably more so than Armor, because really, for one reason, is that it's got like we've been mentioning all pod, the weightiness. Everything moves with that like great weight. And when you shoot a gun, it like pounds your ear, and it's just so satisfying. Like even when you suck at this game, it just like you're just like, oh my god, that dude like blew me up from over there, and he, all this like squad got wiped. That was so damn cool just then, because like the situations in it are so realistic. Even I think the last game I played, I was like bunkered down in a ditch for half the match, and it was still just an amazing experience. And one big part of this game that I really love is the squad communication. So like you'll be put in a squad which is part of your platoon. So I think there's like 6 squads or something, which can all have between like 5 and 8 people, something like that. And people in the squad can't communicate to each other unless they're right next to each other. So, which is called I guess it's called a local chat, a local voice chat. But squads can communicate with each other through the team leader. So things like communication needs to sort of go up through the ranks. So if your radio man dies, you can't then communicate with your other squads. You kind of get like cut off. And so there's this like teamwork aspect that I've just never ever experienced before. Like not even in Armor, because Armor is like a really rudimentary version of this, even though it's considered a realistic shooter. And yeah, I'm just sort of blown away by the detail, the accuracy in terms of like the military history incorporated into it. And yeah, I'm just loving it. I can't recommend it enough for people who like a really authentic experience, and especially if you're into World War II stuff.
That kind of communication up the ranks thing is really interesting. It reminds me, not exactly in the same way, of the commander role in Battlefield games, which I don't know if it exists anymore, but it used to in at least 2142, which I played heaps of. They used to have the commander mode who could kind of direct squads around the battlefield and kind of set objectives and things like that. And I remember I had one friend who that was their role of choice in a Battlefield game. They just try and get the commander role and then don't, get down amongst it and fight the battles, and just kind of, direct the squads around and manage, I guess you'd say, like the strategy of things rather than the individual tactics. And I always thought that was such an interesting thing, especially in a Battlefield game, which you don't think of as a game where people would be interested in that. It's hard enough in Battlefield to get people to like stay in their squads.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll be pleased to hear that this game actually has all the squads, and then the person at the top of it all is a commander. And the commander has access to things like calling in an airstrike, and close air support, which is like a gun run from the P-51s and all different types of planes. And it doesn't feel like, oh, here comes the commander's thing. Like the planes sort of linger about overhead, and I actually thought they were players. And I was like, hey, when I first sort of watched videos, I was like, cool, you can fly planes in this. And then I found out later, no, that's actually just the commander's gun runs that they've called in, or artillery or whatever. But it's just implemented into the game so convincingly, and to the point where, planes actually, if 2 things go at the same time, a commander calls one airstrike in or another airstrike in, and there's fighters in those airstrikes, then the planes will start to battle. And so it just has this like extra level of detail that like, I don't know. It's just one of those things you just got to be there to really experience just the depth and impact of just how authentic that those little experiences in. But it does have the commander role. And another cool thing just under that is the squad leaders can say, cool, I want a quick bunker built there. And then so some of the players have what's it called? Like a shovel. And what that means is that builds things. So that you've actually got a bit of a construction element. So you can construct small pillboxes or defensive lines, or maybe like a frontline headquarters. So you can sort of drop all that stuff in there at this sub commander role, which is controlled then by the squads.
I've got kind of an slightly off-topic question for this, but where does the name come from? Like, obviously, I understand what postscript means, and I guess scriptum is sounding like a Latin version of that. But what's that got to do with this setting or the game itself?
I have no idea. Paul, you might know, being a history buff. I haven't looked into it, but I'm really not sure. I'm not sure if there's maybe some sort of terminology in World War II or either of the world wars that may be relevant to that.
I have no idea. Like a postscriptum is just the PS at the end of a letter, right? So
yeah, I mean,
exactly,
there's no storyline or anything in this, so I'm not sure what the word is about.
There may be a reference, but yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, if I come across that, I'll definitely update you. But yeah, I have no idea.
One other quick question about this one. You said early on it's kind of like a conquest type thing. Do you mean like the kind of capture point battlefield sort of thing? So do you like, for example, the beach landing thing, do you kind of like capture the beach and then like move further inland? Is that kind of how the game plays out?
Yeah, exactly. I'd probably almost say it's like, yeah, that is how it is. I guess there's elements of the rush mode from Battlefield as well, because
Oh yeah,
what usually the battles I've played, and they do go for quite long. So I've only actually played the game 3 times, but that's actually total to about 6 hours of gameplay amongst 3 individual sessions. So the matches are quite long, but usually what happens is there's an occupied area and then an attacking force. It's not really like in Battlefield where you've got 2 attacking forces and then an unoccupied area that they both have to then fight over. Though that I have noticed in the server browser that there are different modes, and I've only played the conquest type mode, so I'm not really sure how the other ones differ from that. If it's like slight variation or if there's something majorly different about it. So I'm yet to experiencing anything else. But yeah, essentially it's very similar to Battlefield. But yeah, that is basically Postscriptum for me so far. I mean, I really recommend it for anyone who wants to go a bit further than what, say, Battlefield 5 might give you. If you're really wanting to go into all-out teamwork, squad-based gameplay that's very authentic, and you love World War II, just go straight for it. It's great.
and it has a Normandy beach landing. And what is a World War II game without that?
Exactly right. You know, we've all played Medal of Honor, Allied Assault. Well, here it is again. Get into it.
So I've been playing something I mentioned last week, which is Forza Motorsports 7, and I just wanted to kind of follow that up with a couple of extra thoughts and things I didn't mention. I've still been kind of working my way through, as I talked about last time. I'm sort of playing half the career, half that free play mode. I've been having a really good time setting up like fun endurance races, and given the sort of extra time we have on our hands, I've been able to do some really long ones, like some sort of like 2 to 3 hour races that I don't do in kind of one sitting. I'll take like, 2 or 3 breaks throughout them as I do them. But it's actually been really fun to like set the difficulty really high. And in a normal Forza race, which is like maybe like 5 laps, you might gain, with the difficulty set really high, you might gain like 1 second a lap on your opponent. And because the game doesn't have qualifying, which we complained about last time, you start like way back down the grid, and 5 laps is nowhere near enough to catch the leader. But if you've got like a 80 lap race, then you can kind of slowly claw that distance back at 1 second a lap. And I've had a real fun time just playing those kind of endurance races where I have to sort of maintain concentration all the time, because I'm sort of chipping away at the gap to the person in front. And then, you catch them and you pass them, and then you kind of refocus and chip away at the gap again. It's kind of like, there's something almost like, for me at least, like therapeutic about a long endurance race like that, where I just kind of settle in.
I'm actually a bit curious about how the endurance works in Forza 6 versus Forza 7. Is it basically the same, or is there a way that you can, say, pit in and then come back at a later gaming session? Because that's one thing I've always felt needed to be in an endurance session for, say, a video game. Because, you might be in the middle of a game and be like, oh, crap, there's an emergency, or you just need to leave. Have they amended that somehow? Is that something that's even possible? I don't know.
No, there's no save feature or anything for endurance races. Like, I can pause, and some of them I've done over the course of I've done them over 12 hours. I do half an hour in the morning, and then I could do other stuff, and then I come back and do half an hour more. So that's how I've kind of gone about it. I get what you mean, that it will be useful to have a save function like that. I kind
of defeating the purpose, though, right?
Yeah, that's
it's endurance for a reason.
That's true.
I start to feel a little bit like that. I know I can pause it and walk away for 6 hours, and it's it's functionally the same as saving and coming back, but there is something about knowing that I can't just turn the Xbox off, or that if I want to do a 3-hour race, at the very least I've got to do it that day.
I guess where I'm going with that is just don't start an endurance race on Forza when you know there's about to be a thunderstorm, because it could be all over on that final lap.
Besides that, one of the other things I wanted to mention, which I didn't bring up last time, was the graphics in this game, because they are phenomenal. In terms of the car models, I don't think I've ever seen a game which is more photorealistic than this. That's not everything about the game, so it's not the environments outside the track, it's not the crowds in the stands and things like that, but purely the car models. As far as I'm concerned, they are photorealistic at this point. It's unbelievable.
Even over 6?
Yeah. I
Wow.
put 6 in to kind of compare, and 7 is a step up again. It's just, and I don't know whether it's little things the lighting and reflections are just they push it a little bit higher every time, and yeah, it's ridiculous in terms of just kind of the car porn you get visually from this game.
I have not seen Forza 7, as you well know, but the boys have recently been playing Forza Horizon 4, and Shayla and I were blown away by just the realism and the appearance, the graphics and everything looks utterly incredible. Of course, in that one, you got lakes and countrysides to drive through as well, so they've got a bit more going on. But it's, again, the cars and the way the light hits the paint jobs and everything, it's incredible.
Yeah, Horizon 4, I think, is that's newer than Forza 7, I think. So it's that one's even a step up again. I've seen screenshots that people take of their cars in that, like you say, next to the lake, or out on the country road, and sometimes you have to double take, and it's ridiculous. The other thing I wanted to mention as well, last time we kind of talked that Forza sort of has these pros and cons because of what it is, and I've had a few other things pop up that have been frustrating me about Forza 7. It has night races, and it has weather in terms of you can set the track to rainy or dry, but it doesn't have a day-night cycle or dynamic weather, which is really annoying. It has a kind of dynamic weather thing in that you can set a chance to rain at some point during the race, but you sort of set it over 3 periods, I think. So you have sort of, it's sort of segment 1, 2, and 3 of a race, and you set the chance to rain, but there's no option you can just flick to say dynamic weather, maybe it will rain at any point. And while it has night races, it doesn't have the option of a day-night race, which is really annoying in a game that has endurance racing, that I can't do my 3-hour race and say I want it to go from, day to night and then day again, like a 24-hour Le Mans race or something. And those, it's the no qualifying that we talked about last time. It seems like something that would be such an easy thing to put in the game, but it's just little things like that which are overlooked.
I don't even think I'd be mad with a compulsory dynamic weather system to a Forza game, because with Forza 6, there's a whole series that it's called I can't remember, it's called the wet shootout or something like that. And it's it's all rainy weather, and if you don't like that, and you want to finish the game, you still have to do that series. So I would be totally open to just being like, cool, I don't know what the weather's going to be like on the next race.
Yeah, it has a, like rainy as a set thing. So before a race, if you're doing like the career mode, you can see that this is a rainy race. And I like exactly like you're saying, I kind of just wish it was like it might rain. Like any race you're doing, maybe it will rain because that's how real life works.
Yeah, yeah. And even if you hate raining, I'm sure the AI hate raining as well because everyone races like trash in the rain. So
right. Everyone's a bit slower.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone's at that same standard.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a bit disappointing because that's actually something I remember seeing marketed for the game is like a change to the weather system. I'm not sure if they used the word dynamic, but they said that there was like weather cycles or something like that. And I was like, oh, cool. That means that weather is like a full dynamic slate in the game.
Yeah.
But it's disappointing to hear that it's just basically just withered down to a little option that you can or can't do.
Yeah, it's like you can choose. So you could say like at the start of the race, it's definitely raining, and then at the end of the race, it's a 50% chance that it's raining and that kind of thing. And I wish there was an option to just hit random across all of them, rather than you can't go into a race without knowing the settings that you chose. And I guess you could set it to 50% for the whole race, right? But I don't know, it's just not the same. The other little annoying thing it's been bothering me as I've played more and more is that the game has over 700 cars, but it has no way to filter those cars in a custom way that is something like favorites. So, I've got a couple of hundred cars now in this game, and there are maybe 10 that I really, really like driving. And a couple of those I remember because, I've liked them through the last 5 Forzas. And a couple of them are things that I've kind of just come across in this game and thought like, oh, this car is really nice to drive. And I wish they just had a favorite option so that I could, hit a button on a car and be like, yeah, I like that car. And then when I'm just playing around in the free play mode, I can flip through my favorites and be like, oh yeah, that's a car I really like to drive. Maybe I'll have a race with that. Whereas now it's a case of I've got to scroll through all of my 200 cars and I've got to remember which ones were fun 2 weeks ago when I did that one race with them. It just feels like if you're going to have 700 cars in your game, give players the option to filter them in a custom way like that. It's just, it's real little stuff that I guess it's like if the game was really bad, I wouldn't care about this because there'd be bigger problems. It's because the game is so good that it's these little oversights that really get to me.
Yeah, I feel like the favorite system is sort of something that has been in basically any game that has any kind of database or list in it, right? Like for decades now.
Right,
it's like a given.
It's just like a shortlisting feature. It's such a simple thing. I have heard that Forza Horizon 4 has it, so fingers crossed that when we get Forza 8, it has a favorite feature as well, because it really needs it with this many cars. But
there you go, turn 10. Hopefully you've learned your lesson.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm going to keep plugging away at Forza for the foreseeable future. With all those cars and the sort of endless races I can set up, it's going to be one of those games that I just kind of keep playing. We sort of mentioned this from time to time. It's a great podcasting game, so I just kind of start up a long race and then throw on a couple of podcasts. It's really good for that. So it's replaced FIFA as my podcast game.
Lovely.
When you said it's a good podcasting game, I thought you were about to reveal that you've been like doing an endurance race like this whole time we've been recording. But hey, speaking of things you'll be doing for the foreseeable future, what else is everybody planning on playing before the next episode? JT, what you got?
Well, we'll be continuing the Doom series. I have still been playing that, and I think that might be a bit of an ongoing thing for the foreseeable future for me. Doom 3 is done, but I'll be continuing with the 2 expansion packs for that, Resurrection of Evil and The Lost Mission. I also found on Steam, randomly, that Doom 64, as in like the Nintendo 64 Doom, is on Steam. So I snatched that up for like a few dollars or something and found out that that's actually one of the canon series. It's sort of quite different to Doom 1 and 2. So I'm actually going to go and play that. to get a bit of perspective. And apart from that, probably just continue with Postscriptum and GTA 5 sort of as the mainstays, and then sort of be chipping away at Doom in between. So looking forward to continuing the hellish nightmare that is Doom, and hopefully get a bit more out of that. How about yourself, Paul? What about you?
I am going to be continuing to play a lot of Age of Empires 2, which I have been playing already. JT, you've just picked this up and you've joined our little Age of Empires group.
Definitive edition, by the way.
Yeah, specifically Definitive Edition. We didn't have time to fit it in today, but we've been playing a whole lot of that, and I've definitely got some thoughts on that. We talked about it before, but things have come along since then, and definitely got some thoughts. I'll be moving along with Red Dead Redemption as well. Besides that, I'm not really sure. You know, like between sort of Forza, Age of Empires, and Red Dead, that's taken up a lot of time. So that might be all I have for next time. Timmy, you only had Anthem this episode. Are you going to have more for us next time?
Well, I'll definitely have more Anthem for you next time. Like I've only played a few hours, and it's got me at the moment. Like it feels a bit tropey, and so they're going to have to do some stuff with the story to keep me interested, especially because, you know, like they've kind of taken the thrill out of like looting stuff. Like I just have a couple of guns when I get back. Like they don't have like big loot drops or anything like that. So they'll need to do something, but I'm keen to keep playing it for now. The other big one though is Shayla just today picked up Animal Crossing after just like the unbelievable amounts of hype on Twitter. Like it's a meme factory unto itself, it seems.
This is like it's the isolation game, it seems like.
Yeah. I'm like shocked like Game Freak didn't move up the Pokemon DLC scheduled for like June or July. Like you'd think they would have capitalized, right? But no, Animal Crossing is the thing, and it is now in the household. So depending on how addicted Shayla becomes to it, I might see if I can get my hands on it for a little bit. But yeah, that's all that's really on the horizon there for the time being.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts about that, because that one seems to have kind of, I don't know whether it's because of this current situation, but it seems to have kind of crossed all those lines for casual gamers and things like that. Like the people I know who don't even touch games are saying like, yeah, I bought a Switch to play Animal Crossing and things like that.
Well, I actually played the original on DS, right? And it kind of had a cult following that behaved exactly like this widespread following now. And I feel like it just like kind of percolated, and it was like there were like memes and if you know kind of thing, right? And enough word of mouth. It was like that cutesy game that like anyone could play, but it had enough kind of in it that it wasn't like a game that gamers wouldn't play, you know? Like kind of that Nintendo sweet spot, I suppose.
Right.
But yeah, this one has like really blown up thanks to its accessibility in a troubled time, I suppose.
All right. Well, that's definitely some stuff to look forward to for next episode. But that's all we have for today. If you want to get in touch with questions or anything else you want to tell us or suggest, discussion topics, anything like that, you can always contact us by email, discanddice@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter @discanddice. We're on Facebook, just search for Disc and Dice, all those normal places. You can find the pod on whatever your podcasting app of choice is, which you've probably already done if you're listening to this right now. Yeah, that's the podcast for today. Thank you guys for joining me on this evening.
My pleasure.
I've got nothing.
Got nothing but a forced little chuckle.
I could have just said thank you very slowly and hope it sort of hits the nail, but no.
Thanking you. Like pronounce the hyphen.
Oh, you know what the worst is? When people say thanking you. It's like, no.
Oh, that's terrible. That's not real.
What are you doing?
All right, we're done. See you in 2 weeks.
Done.
Bye.
Games.
Games.